My Mag Necro build for PvP. We'll get right into it, but first, the class we are a Breton, or race I should say. Dark Elf and High Elf will work. Dark Elf is really good playing into that max stat gameplay we're using. It's going to boost your stam up to about 1700, no Undaunted. We do not have Undaunted on this spec, but we're a Breton. We're using the spring-loaded Infusion and the Mage Mundus, and we're a Breton for a couple reasons. We get the 2000 Max Magicka, the 2310 Spell Resistance, which makes us extremely bulky. It does double when you're affected by a Burning Shield, Concussed, a status effect, and you get the 100 mag recovery plus the 7% reduced cost, which we're planning to do a lot of reduced costs on this build. The regen, our mag regen looks a little low, but I'll get into that and how it is actually much higher than what it looks like as long as you're in combat. Alright, and the clip did cut out due to the duration that I have for recording. So we'll cut to where I left off after this, and I'm sorry about that. I've tried to record this about 4 or 5 different times, and I'm not gonna record a whole nother 35-40 minutes whenever I can just do this. So I apologize for it being sloppy. But into the gear, we're using the Nirnhoned Inferno Staff. Sharpened is going to give you more damage here, and but I like the Nirnhoned for the increased healing while we're on our front bar, because we have a lot of heal over times going. So I went with Nirnhoned, plus we use this set on other classes at the moment. So I didn't want to be bothered to transmute just for a little more penetration when we had built-in penetration from the class, the light armor, and our CP, and the Duster Staff. We're using a shock damage enchant here to proc the minor concussed for 8% more damage on the target we're targeting. And if you don't know what Necromancer does, it gives you 3 ticks of max magicka, and then while you have a pet, like your Blast Bones does count as a pet, or your Intensive Mender up, you get more damage. We're using the Ice Staff of Necropotence Defending. You can go Sword and Board here instead, but we are a caster build, and I prefer the Ice Staff to be able to proc that enchant at range. Plus, we don't really need the mobility from the Sword and Board while we're blocking, because we're not perma-blocking on this build. We can block quite a bit, we can dodge quite a bit, we can sprint quite a bit because of the spec we're running. But I went with Ice Staff, and we're blocking with Stam still, because we forego the first passive, the Trifocus passive, which is only going to increase our flame heavy attacks by 12%, I believe it is, whenever you have both in here. And we're not doing flame heavy attacks, they just take too long, they're not worth it. And we have better ways to sustain. You don't get the same amount of sustain either way from a Duster Staff as you would running a Restive Staff and heavy attacking. So we're not relying on that for sustain. We're not losing out on anything, plus we're still able to block with stamina. You get the 36 reduced cost to block with the Ice Staff still, just like with Sword and Board, and 20% damage mitigation while blocking. So that's really nice. That's why we went with this. We're not using any Restive Staff abilities. Our next set is Blood Spawn, and that's going to give us stam recovery, 14 ultimate when it does proc, and the 6450 spell and physical resistances, bringing us up to actually capped resist, and we can go over the cap with our burst heal. I'll explain that as we go into the skills. But looking at our fully buffed character sheet real quick, we're coming in at 46. Hold on, something's off here. Something's off. Oh, yep, our food. We're coming in at 47,000 max magicka, 25,000 health, and 15.2k max stam. Very good max stats. Now the regen does not look very good on the magicka side, only 1500, but we, like I explained, through our class passives, our reduced cost, and our abilities that we're actually running, we have a lot more mag sustain than that. A lot. When you're in combat, you should not even have anywhere near low mag. Like, your sustain is amazing on this spec. We do only get up to the 2259 base spell damage. With our enchant proc, it goes closer to 2700, and with continuous it's over 3k, so it's very nice. We get the 39% spell crit, which with our passives and execute range or at low health for our healing actually goes up a lot more. I'll explain that in the passives as we go over it. We're incredibly bulky, like I said. 27.7k spell resistance on the front bar and just under 26k physical on the back bar with the ice staff. Only 2757 crit resist. Plenty high, I think, for the spec with all the mitigation we're rocking. But we'll go back into the gear where I cut off, and like I said, I'm sorry that it's a little sloppy at the beginning, but we'll cut back. Anyways, getting back into it. So yeah, Necropotence, if you don't know what it does, it gives you just a crap ton of max magicka. Whenever you have your blast bones or your wraith up, which you should have up all the time, you're getting another 3,100 max magicka. It's extremely strong. Blood spawn. We just have the triglyphs here because when I like triglyphs, and again I use this set on a lot of characters. And then our third set is Crafty Afik. This is like the hulking Draugr for magic amount. It just gives you a crap ton of max magic on 2 through 5, and it's very strong. I will show you an alternative setup. We were using Bright Throats before, but I dropped Bright Throats and Inner Light for this. And I've foregone the sustain on the character sheet, and we'll get into that and why we dropped Inner Light. But we have Inpin on everything. We're using 2 protective traits, giving us a lot of bulkiness, and as you can see, even with 2 protective traits, like I said, we still have that 47,000 max magicka on our character sheet. So that works out really nice. We're using 1 magic recovery and 2 spell damage glyphs. Let's see. I think that's it for the gear. You could put more tri-stats on here if you want to, but our max stats are really good, and I wanted to push that max magicka a little more. Now getting into the abilities, we'll start on our back bar, kind of explain a few things about our sustain and how we're getting that extra bulkiness. So we have Resistant Flesh right here, which gives you a fully buffed up tooltip of we get a fully buffed up tooltip of 13.1k burst heal. It does apply a minor defile to you, which isn't a big deal. Actually, it works really well into the gameplay style we're using. It helps our sustain, and I'll get into that on the next skill. But I've seen up to 12k burst heals on this in PvP, and you can see you grant the target, including yourself if you're healing yourself, spell and physical resistance equal to half the amount healed for 3 seconds. So what I'll do is whenever I'm low health, I'll pop my shield, block, hit the burst heal, and good to go. Right, reset our buffs. You do not want to use this more than every 3 seconds because you will overwrite that spell and physical resist if you heal yourself for less. And we get a nice passive here. It's very good. That the lower your health is, you get a critical strike chance increase of up to 20%. So we try to use this only as an emergency heal and just get that big healing, the bulkiness. A lot of the times the blood spawn's already procced when we're taking that much pressure, which puts us well over the resistance cap. So even if we're debuffed, we are extremely bulky on a light armor setup, right? The minor defile is not a big deal either, because while we have a negative effect on us, our healing is increased by 8%. So that's pretty good. I'm not sure exactly how that adds up, if it's a straight 8% minus the 15, whatever. But anyways, moving on, we have Expunge. This is a huge part of our sustain, actually. This is why I swapped out Inner Light and went with the crafty effete instead and dropped my sustain because I got rid of the inner light and had room on this for the cleansing. So you cleanse up to 2 negative effects. There is a morph that does 4, but I find this is much better for the way I'm playing because you get 500 magicka and stamina back for each negative effect you cleanse, and this includes the minor defile that you put on yourself. So you see that you hit it and you heal, and this cleanse only costs 1882 health. So with the heals over time we're rocking, this is essentially free to cast, and you get up to 1,000 magicka and stamina back. You always have negative effects on you. That's how we're one of the big ways we're sustaining our magicka right here. Because if you're hitting this every, theoretically, 1 second, the way sustain works is the sustain on your character sheet, it only happens every 2 seconds. So theoretically, if you're hitting this every 2 seconds on global cooldown, which you're not necessarily going to be able to, but theoretically that's 2k more magicka and stamina recovery. So that's almost like 3k stam recovery just right there. But let's say you're actually using it every 2 seconds because on your global cooldowns you can't use a skill more than every 1 second. So you're hitting this, you're hitting your harness, you're hitting this again. That's at the very least 1k mag and stam recovery, which brings us up theoretically to 2.5 mag recovery and say 2k stam recovery. Right, extremely strong. Plus, while slotted, the cost of all your abilities are reduced by 3%. So look at this Spirit Wraith, or Intensive Mender. It only costs 1,000. Right, all our skills are really cheap. 2592. Harness Magicka, 30. That's pretty cheap damage shield. We'll get into that soon. Now the next skill we're rocking, you need a corpse, which you create a corpse with both the Wraith, right there, the Blast Bones, and even your armor buff if it goes at least half the duration, creates a corpse. So we have the corpse right there. You get a 23.3k heal over 12 seconds, which is a lot. It's a really strong heal over time. I prefer this over Healing Ward because of all the things you get from it. You also restore 2808 stamina over 12 seconds, which, doing the math, that's I think 234 or so stamina every 1 second, which equates to another 468 stamina recovery. So we have a lot of stamina recovery, which synergizes very, very well with our 15.2k pool. I mean, like I said, we're extremely bulky. We are able to roll dodge. We are able to sprint on this magic spec, which is very important because your biggest problem with Necromancer, on magic spec at least, is mobility. You don't have a whole lot of mobility, but we also have ways to get around that, such as the increased stam pool, all the stam sustain we have, and we do have snare removal and major expedition on this build. We'll get to that on our next bar. Anyways, moving on, we have Harness Magicka, which fully buffed up. Comes in at a pretty hefty tooltip for this shield, 9.6k shield, and it only costs 3672 magicka. I think it's the most expensive skill on our bar, yeah. But you get 1413 magicka back for each spell projectile hit, or that hits you. So the way we're running this, we actually have enough reduced cost on this where we get 4.2k magicka back when we're fighting magicka characters, which doesn't just make this shield free, it also nets you 600 magicka return total. So you actually gain magicka for using this on the spec we're using. It is more than free. It gives you even more sustain. So there's that. When you're in combat, like I said, with this and this, plus your base recovery, you will not run out of magicka as long as you're playing correctly. And you don't have to rely on heavy attacks to do that. Now our Spirit Mender, this is our strongest heal over time. It's also a way to proc our Necropotence. So buffed up, it gives you 7.6k health on the spec we're running every 2 seconds and creates a corpse on death. Or if you use it again within half the duration of it running out. And that plays into our Mortal Coil, like I said earlier. But that 7.6k, I see reliably non-crit heals for 3.2, 3.3k every 2 seconds, and I've seen 5 to 6k crit heals on myself, and we have a decent amount of crit on this build, especially when we're low health, like I said, with the living or near-death experience. In proportion to your wounds, you get 20% more. So if we're rocking the 39%, that's 59% when you're at low health for your heals to crit, which is really, really nice. So we have a lot of heals over time right here, and we're not really trying to spam our burst heal, okay? And you definitely don't want to use it within 3 seconds of using it. We're relying more on Harness Magicka and our heals over time, and then we hit this whenever we're in an emergency. We get the bulkiness from it, the way that works. So we can have our hot stuff. Maybe we don't have that hot up yet, right? So we're hitting our Harness Magicka, block, hit our burst heal, expunge that, refresh the Wraith, put the Mortal Coil down, Harness Magicka, go back into our offensive rotation, right? We're relying a lot on those heals over time. They are extremely strong. I think Necro has the strongest heals in the game right now for PvP. I don't know about the PvE end, but hey, I'm a PvP player, this is what we're doing. We're using the Goliath ultimate here. We don't have a resto. I would prefer the resto ultimate, but really all we're doing with that would be we're not using this ultimate a whole lot. It's fun to use. Use it if you like it. It is extremely fun to use, and you can body block for your friends. You become extremely bulky. You gain 30,000 max health for 20 seconds and immediately restore 30,000 health when you pop the ultimate. You restore 600 health, 1500 health on light and heavy attacks, and you do 1764 damage to all nearby enemies, AoE, and heal for the same amount. So the more enemies around you, the more you're going to heal for. You are extremely bulky, but I don't really use this per se, just very rarely, because I feel like I'm just prolonging the inevitable if I'm severely outnumbered. I'd rather just go straight into my Colossus, use my front bar ultimate, and try to line up the burst. But I mean, if you're fighting, if the fight looks winnable, but you're taking a lot of pressure and you just need to be able to go offensive, this is a great skill. So if I'm getting pressured by 3 or 4 people and I feel like I can win the fight, I mean, I'm severely low on resources, something, I will pop this and try to reset the fight and burst one of them down while I'm in it real quick to give myself some breathing room. You do not generate ultimate while you're in this though. Anyways, like I said, we are not a mag sork anyway, so running the Resto staff with the Resto ultimate back here, we could pop the Resto ultimate and just have a few seconds of breathing room and then just die again, because we're mobile, but we're not as mobile as a mag sork, where we could just pop the Resto ultimate, hit some shields, and streak away, and then pick off whoever chases. So moving on to our front bar, we have Blast Bones with a fully buffed up tooltip of 15.5k, right? Takes a couple seconds for this to summon, and then it chases the target. And the longer it chases, like I said, it increases the damage by 10% for up to 50%. So essentially, with max range, we could have a 20, like around a 22, 23k tooltip on this. If it chases for the full duration, it hits extremely hard. And that, like I said when I was explaining the gear, that's another reason I went for the Flame Staff, because you potentially have a better net gain on the AoE damage of Blast Bones by knocking them back and making it chase a little longer. And our ultimate costs so much that I don't think it's best to just buff 2 skills just for the AoE damage whenever this is hardly going to be up. But that's Blast Bones. It's extremely cheap. So when we have our armor, it only costs 1242. A lot of really cheap skills on this spec. Helps play into the low sustain we're running. Theoretical low sustain, I like to say. Next skill is Race Against Time. This is a must-have. This gives you your 2 seconds of snare immunity and removes all snares. It also gives you Major Expedition for 4 seconds. So this gives us our mobility, and along with that, with our good crit values, and we do have good offensive crit values too, better than on the character sheet, which I'll explain in a second, but it also gives you 12 seconds of Minor Force, increasing your critical damage by 10%, which we're not rocking extremely high spell damage. A lot of our damage is coming from critical damage, our max stat, and some penetration. A good balance between the critical damage, penetration, and spell damage, with a hefty focus on the max stat. Alright, so this is our source of snare removal and mobility. It gives us some offensive pressure also. You want to keep this up. I don't have it on my back bar like a lot of people run, because I like to have my defensive things right here, and I can just bar swap, pop it, and go. But anyways, next ability is Summoner's Armor. This gives you your physical resistance and spell resistance. The major buffs, the 5280 you see there. While active, it reduces the cost of Blast Bones, Skeletal Mage, and your Spirit Mender by 12%. So that's why our Blast Bones and Spirit Mender are so cheap, or another reason, on top of being Breton, on top of this reduced cost for the back bar on the Spirit Mender. You see 1045, 1242, extremely cheap. And it also creates a corpse when it ends, or whenever you refresh it on duration. It can be a little buggy, as you saw there. There's still some bugs to work out on the class, obviously. But for our stun, we're using Flame Reach. I already explained this. Knock people back. You can be trolly, knock people off bridges. I really prefer it on the spec to the lightning staff. You're kiting around. You can really get some good line of sight just by kiting around the cliffs and knocking them off of them as they chase you. You can get some. You can pick your targets a lot easier by doing that. Our spammable, the Ricochet Skull. You can go with the Force Shock. Either morph are good. You can get an interrupt or a little more cleave damage, but this plays really well into our crit damage. I'll explain that right now. The more Graveslord abilities you have slotted, which are our Blast Bones, our Ricochet Skull, and our Colossus Ultimate, gives you 10% more for each ability slotted on your crit damage in execute range, which is really important because we do not have an execute on this class. We don't have it. So this is kind of our way of executing. We get them low, and we get that passive, right? And buffed up, we have the 39% spell crit. So that's actually an execute range 69% spell crit. It goes up to 75 if you have a Sork in your group, if you're doing group play, because of their minor prophecy passive. So it's extremely strong. It's a good passive, and buffed up, the tooltip on it is just under 10k. And you can see every third cast of this ability actually does 20% more damage. Now the base damage of this ability does do slightly more than your Crushing Shock or your Force Pulse. And the third cast gives you 20% more damage, which is really nice, and it becomes an AoE hitting up to 2 other targets, and there's no diminish on the damage. It hits each other target for the full damage, so it's a very nice skill. The Destro Spammable does weave a little smoother. It's a faster projectile. This is a little bit of slower one and easier predicted, but I really like that focus on the AoE damage, the passives we get for slotting it, so I would not go another route here. Alright, our front bar ultimate is the Glacial Colossus. Now this is awesome. Like I said, it's hard to use open field, but it hits like a truck, and it makes everything else hit like a truck. So buffed up, we have a 1200 tooltip, hits 3 times. The last hit stuns all the enemies in the area. It's an area of effect ability. And it also applies minor or major vulnerability, increasing the damage they take by 30%. So, best case scenario, imagine you have your blast bones with the full 50% increased damage with a whopping 22 to 23k tooltip, and then it hits as this ultimate hits. That's another 30% damage on top of that. I mean, you're wiping groups. You're wiping groups like this. You could use Soul Assault here, and it's very strong, especially solo. It's better open world, but I do not have it unlocked, and I really like I said, the passives I get from this with the 10% there. And I just really feel like it plays into the Necromancer playstyle and theme, so a little bit of a roleplay reason there too, whatever. But that's all the skills. Getting into the passives real quick. So this is a new class. We do have some really nice passives on here. When your Blastbone Skeletal Mage or Spirit Mender dies, the cost of your next Blastbone Skeletal Mage or Spirit Mender is reduced by 25%. So even more reduced cost on those extremely cheap abilities. They're pretty much free on this spec. So let's see. We went over the death yield at 25% for each Gravelord ability slotted. You get the 10%. While a Gravelord ability is active, your spell and physical penetration is increased by the 1500, which is very nice. Penetration is the best source of damage in the game, and it allows us to drop a little bit of out of our CP to put it into other places. Increase your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. Now this is a big reason I mentioned Soul Assault. You can get that thing hitting like a truck on the Magic and Necromancer. Probably the hardest hitting Soul Assaults you can get, but you don't have any range dots actually really in the class kit. So I don't really understand this passive, or at least why we don't have better dots. The Skeletal Mage is an alright dot, but it's hard to use in PvP. I'm not even sure it really counts as a dot. But the tooltip on the Boneyards, it looks good, but people just walk out of it. Whatever. Yeah, I don't understand. I guess it's more for a it's more of a PvE passive, but it does work really well with Soul Assault. And the Bone Tire passes. When an enemy near you dies that you were in combat with, you restore another 200 Magicka and Stamina. So, I mean, on keep defenses, not just really solo play, outnumbered, this is a very, very good passive. You're always gonna be topped off, man. Always. Like, it just plays more into the regen playstyle we're going for. Reduce the damage you take from damage over time abilities by 10%. This is really nice. This allows us to drop points in our CP out of the damage over time reduction into Bastion and other sources. Increase your healing received by 2% for each Bone Tyrant ability slotted. We have one on both bars, so we get 2%. Increase your max health by 1250, which is a lot nicer than it sounds. I think max health is a underrated stat in PvP. I wouldn't go out of my way to get it necessarily, but it helps us get to that 25k marker, which I really, really like to have at least 25k health on a light armor spec. Dawnbreakers are hitting really hard this patch. Ultimates just hit really hard. It helps you from getting bursted. Anyways, moving on. While you have a negative effect on you, your healing done is increased by 8%. We went over that already. While you have a living death ability slotted, your critical chance, we went over this, in proportion to your runes, increased by 20%. Very good. When you use an ability on a corpse, so our Mortal Coil, we generate 10 ultimate. It can only happen every 16 seconds, but hey, we'll take it. Our ultimate is extremely expensive. While your Blastbone Skeletal Mage or Spirit Mender is active, which it should always be, you get 200 Magicka and Stamina back. It's very nice. We saw this. Gives us close to 1,000 mag and stamina. Or 1,000 stamina recovery total on the character sheet. Very strong, along with our other passives. You can see it drops down there. It is affected by the light armor passes. As you can see, we went from 1200 to 1500 to another 300 because of our potion and light armor passes. That covers it for the class. Skills and passives. Another passive you'll want always on every spec is the medicinal use, especially since we're using our potions to get our crit and our spell damage. It's very handy. It doesn't take very long to get up. You just sit there and click square while you watch TV or something. I don't have all these. Sigic order passives, I haven't gone out of my way to get these. I've done a lot of grinding and a lot of testing, so I just haven't been bothered yet. But they are really nice passives. Some more reduced cost for your Sigic. Little spell orb gives you some extra damage, but the big one here is the damage shield and the major protection you're going to get when you finish it out are extremely nice. So I do recommend finishing that Fighter's Guild because our ultimates, you're going to want this when you kill an undead, Daedra, werewolf. This includes vampire characters. You're going to generate 9 ultimate. It's very nice, along with the ultimate where you kill players that you generate. So you'll want to get those. And I am running 2 heavy to increase our max health mostly by 4%, but a little bit of health recovery, not noticeable necessarily, but it's there. And the mag and stam plus some more resistances. That's 724. Is actually really nice. It doesn't look like a lot, but it's not really a lot, but every 660 resistance you get equates to 1% damage mitigation, so a little over 1% damage mitigation for having all 3 of those. I wouldn't go out of my way to get it as you're leveling the character, but in the end, definitely worth putting the points in. Just a little more damage mitigation on this incredibly bulky spec we're running. We'll go into the champion points real quick. Test these, let me know what works for you. I'd really like some feedback, as the class is very new, but I always put 46 here, or 56 here for the Warlord, reduce cost of break free. 27 into Sprinter, because we are sprinting to get away with our major expedition snare removal, and we're a Magicka spec. We don't get that passive from the medium armor tree. I always put 1 into Siphoning here. It's leftover. Still puts a debuffer on him, but you don't get the debuff from Siphoner just for the 1 point. It's low on the priority purge list, but hey, it's one more thing for them to purge if they're a Templar or some other class that's purging things. I have 44 into Mooncap to increase our stam recovery. Now, you don't get a whole lot out of this necessarily because our base stam recovery isn't exceedingly high, but with everything added together, you saw there it's 900, low 900s, so it does help, and we're not doing heavy attacks. Normally I wouldn't put this much into recovery on a low regen spec, but it does allow us to get up to at least that 1500 base recovery here, and like I said, we're not doing heavy attacks on this build. You don't get much from the Destro, and we don't have a restoration staff slotted for that increased heavy attack, so just went with the 14% here to bring us up to that at least 15% base recovery, or 1500. 66 into Tumbling. I do like to roll dodge on this build. We have an incredible stam sustain like I explained, and this really helps when you can dodge 2-3 times in a row. If I wouldn't recommend the 3rd one necessarily, but you can, and you can still break free after that. And you have a lot of stam sustain, so you will fill up that stam pool again pretty fast. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 27 into Blessed for the 7% increased healing. Elfborn, really important here because, yeah, we only have the 39-40% crit, but a lot of our damage is coming with the minor force when we do crit, plus this. It's extremely strong, and the crit healing, when we're dipping low, especially when we're on our front bar and we have our hots going and we dip low, that can really, really save you. So the critical healing is a big part of why we have so much into this Elfborn also. It's very nice. I have 65 into here because all of our damage is pretty much direct damage except for our ultimate and whatnot. We had 31 into spell penetration between the light armor passives, the necro passives, and the destruction staff. We actually have a lot of spell penetration, and I would normally go up to I normally rock at least 3100 in here, but because of the necro and being able to put points elsewhere like blessed, which is really nice, we go with the 31 here. 81 into master at arms. Like I said, direct damage, or I guess, well, I said direct damage over here, but you guys know the elemental damage, pretty much magic damage. But all of our skills, like I said, except for the Colossus, are really direct damage. And that might even count as direct damage too. Not sure if it counts as a dot or direct damage, but it hits really hard anyways without points of Thaumaturge, and we're not putting anything into Thaumaturge because we're not trying to buff that weak flame die. You get, like, the lower the tooltip is anyways, the less effective percent value is going to affect it. So we do have 56 into Ironclad for 20% less damage taken. We have from direct damage checks 37 into crit resist. Now I would normally put a few more points into here to bring us up to at least the 2800 3k marker, but we have points elsewhere and we're incredibly bulky anyways, so I feel the 27 nearly 2800 crit resist is enough. We only have 37 into hardy. Now normally I would run the 10% here, but actually you like I explained earlier, 660 resistance is worth 1% mitigation. So by taking some points out of here and here, because we have the light armor, we have a lot of spell mitigation with light armor and everything, and being a Breton, we're allowed to put more points here, which actually gives us a net total of increased percent mitigation. You can do the math, 6, 12, almost 4%, almost 4% more, where you would only get 1 or 2% more from investing a lot more points into here. Thick-skinned, because of our passives, I'm only running the 10% into here, which I haven't had a problem. We also have a purge on our power, so that's really nice. Normally I would run a lot more because it also affects the Templar jabs, but like I said, this is actually closer here to 20% with our passives. And 56 into Bastion. We're allowed to put a lot more into here because of the way our class spec is actually in being a Breton, because we're saving points here, here, and here, and we're allowed to get our Harness Magic up to that nice 9.6k tooltip. So that's the CP, that's the build, guys. Like I said, give me your feedback. It's a new class. I'll be testing more things. I'll have more gameplay footage for you. And I have an alternative setup right here, just real quick. So if you don't have Crafty of Thief and you do like the increased sustain, what we do is we do go with Bright Throats, right? We drop the Purge, go with Bright Throats, and we'll put Inner Light here, and we'll put our Race Against Time here. And we have similar stats. We use the spring-loaded infusion drink instead of the tri-stat food, and it's very similar stats. Because I have tri-stat glyphs on, you get a little more health and stamina. You would have the same amount of max magic if you did not have that, but you actually get a good amount more recovery, 400 more magic recovery this way, and still very similar stats. You just don't get the purge, which is actually more than 400 magic recovery easily. It's way more than that. So I prefer the crafty and the purge, and that's why you can see it right there. But this will work. I'll have a link in the description where I am using my alternative build, and it's some group play, and I'll have a little bit of group play footage with the crafty of feet at the end of it coming up right now. So like I said, enjoy. And the group play is just kind of there to show off the sustain we do have and show you it does work. I'll have, like I said, I'll have more clips coming up with some solo footage, some PVX.
You ready? Let's go! Yeah! For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20 concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. He doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard, whether it's the beat or the mic. He feels so unlike everybody else, alone, in spite of the fact that some people still think that they know him. But fuck him, he knows the code. It's not about the salary, it's all about reality and making some noise, making a story, making sure his click stays up. That means when he puts it down, Tox picking it up. Let's go.
Who the hell is he anyway? He never really talks much, never concerned with status, but still even him starstruck. Humble through opportunities given despite the fact that many misjudge him cause he makes a living from writing raps. Put it together himself, now the picture connects. Never asking for someone's help or to get some respect. He's only focused on what he wrote. His will is beyond reach, and now it all unfolds. The skill of an artist. This is 20% skill, 80% fear, be 100% clear, cause Ryu was ill. Who would've thought he'd be the one that set the West in flames? And I heard him wreck it with the crystal method, name of the game. Came back, dropped Megadeth, took him to church. I like Bleach, man. Ryu had the stupidest verse, this dude is the truth. Now everybody giving them guest spots and stocks through the roof. I heard he fucking with that stock.
This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
They call him Ryu, he's sick and he's spitting fire. And Mike got him out the dryer, he's hot. Found him in Fort Minor with Top, but a fucking nihilist porcupine. He's a prick, he's a cock. The type women wanna be within, rappers hope he gets shot. 8 years in the making, patiently waiting to blow. Now the record with your notice taking over the globe. He's got a partner in crime, this shit is equally dope. You won't believe the kind of shit that comes out of this kid's throat. He's not your everyday on the block. He knows how to work with what he's got, making his way to the top. He often gets a comment on his name. People keep asking him, was it given that birth or does it stand for an acronym? No, he's living proof. Let him rock in the booth. He'll get you buzzing quicker than a shot of vodka with juice. Him and his crew are known around as one of the best, dedicated to what they do and give 100%.
Forget Mike, nobody really knows how or why he works so hard. It seems like he's never got time, because he writes every note and he writes every line. And I've seen him at work when that light goes on in his mind. It's like a design is written in his head every time before he even touches a key or speaks in a rhyme.